A possessed nun wrote down left in a letter that was in a demonic code. It has finally been translated.
Back in the 17th century, a Sicilian nun wrote a letter claiming that she had been possessed by the devil.
In 1676, a nun wrote a message from the devil. For centuries, it was called a hoax, a legend, a warning. Over the years, the church kept it locked away, untouched and unexplained. But in the 21st century, artificial intelligence did what no human mind could. It cracked the code, and what it found is something we weren't supposed to see. This is the true story of the letter that should have stayed buried. Now it has been decoded by an AI, and it's not good. The ink-stained floor. The summer of 1676 in Sicily was relentless. The air shimmered with heat, and the sun blazed mercilessly down on the rugged countryside around Palma di Montechiaro, a small town nestled between rolling hills and the shimmering Mediterranean coast. Within the stone walls of the Benedictine convent, the world seemed paused, a solemn sanctuary of prayer and quiet devotion. But on that fateful day, the peace was shattered. A piercing scream tore through the cloistered halls, echoing off the cold, rough-hewn stones, shattering the morning silence like glass. The sisters rushed toward the source, their sandals clattering on flagstones worn smooth by decades of devotion. At the threshold of Sister Maria Crocifissa della Concezione's cell, they hesitated, a mixture of fear and concern knotting their hearts. When they entered, the scene was both grotesque and mystifying. Sister Maria lay collapsed on the cold, hard floor, her body racked with tremors. Her face and hands were smeared with ink, thick, dark, and still wet in places, oozing from a broken inkwell overturned on the floor. Her once pristine habit was disheveled, soaked with sweat, and stained with the inky mess. Clenched tightly in her trembling fingers was a small, brittle parchment, aged and fragile, covered from edge to edge with a strange tapestry of symbols that none could decipher. These were not letters or words known to any of the sisters, nor did they resemble the Latin script that adorned their sacred texts. Sister Maria's eyes, wild and haunted, refused to meet theirs. She was pale, hollow-cheeked, as if touched by a profound terror. When questioned, she whispered of invisible voices, relentless shadows pressing down on her soul, and an unholy presence that clawed at her mind in the dead of night. The abbess carefully documented the episode in the convent's chronicle, noting the severity of her anguish and the unrelenting spiritual battle that had raged for days, perhaps weeks, but seemed to have culminated in this disturbing outburst. The letter itself became an object of dread. The sisters believed it was no ordinary writing, but a sinister message, crafted by forces of darkness. The inky script was jagged, erratic, and unearthly. Its characters danced and writhed across the page as if alive. Rumors spread quietly beyond the convent's walls, whispers of demonic possession, a direct challenge to the divine order. The forbidden letter. The parchment itself was diminutive, no larger than a modern postcard, yet it bore a weight far beyond its size. Its 14 lines were etched with an intensity that suggested urgency, pain, and warning. The scribbled ink had dried unevenly, creating patterns of shadows and textures that only deepened its mystique. From the very beginning, the letter baffled all who dared to understand it. Scholars and theologians were summoned, linguists versed in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, and the myriad tongues of medieval Europe. Yet, every attempt to decode its cryptic symbols ended in failure. The characters seemed to be a chaotic hybrid, jagged slashes reminiscent of runes from ancient Germanic tribes, mirrored letters that twisted logic and sense, clusters of vowels woven into shapes that defied phonetic rules, and other formations that appeared to have no relation to any known alphabet. Among the few fragments intelligible to the scholars was the word ohime, a mournful Italian lament translating roughly to "O me," a cry of profound sorrow. This lone thread of meaning hinted at deep suffering, but provided no key to the rest of the tangled script. The Church, wary of any artifact that might disturb the delicate balance between faith and heresy, took possession of the letter immediately. It was locked away in the archives beneath the Vatican, shielded from the public eye. Officially, the Holy See remained silent, neither confirming nor denying the letter's existence. Yet within theological circles, the message became a whispered legend, a forbidden text that scholars feared to touch openly. Sister Maria's torment was reframed by the Church as a sign of her spiritual struggle. To some, her resistance against the innumerable evil spirits that plagued her marked her as a figure of piety and divine favor. To others, she was a tragic soul, marked by a darkness that had seeped into her very being. Debate raged quietly but persistently. Had she been chosen by God to endure this trial, or cursed by forces beyond human comprehension? Centuries passed. The parchment, shrouded in mystery and locked behind the iron gates of church archives, became an enigma that history nearly forgot. Yet it waited, waiting for a new kind of light to penetrate its shadows. A force unbound by traditional theology, equipped with the tools of the modern age. When the 21st century finally arrived, bringing with it the dawn of artificial intelligence and digital cryptanalysis, the ancient letter's secrets would be challenged anew. What was once deemed demonic gibberish might now be on the cusp of revelation. A revelation that promised to shake the foundations of faith, history, and human understanding. The cloistered custodians. For centuries, the letter remained not just unread, but untouched. Held in the quiet confinement of the Palma di Montechiaro convent's archive, and later transferred under ecclesiastical supervision, it became an object of both curiosity and caution. Priests assigned to the region were informed of its existence, but few dared to engage with it directly. Among those who did, an uneasy pattern emerged. Fascination quickly turned to withdrawal. In 1838, a Jesuit scholar from Naples was granted access to study the document. After 3 weeks of work, he reportedly left the convent in silence, submitting no report. His personal journal, discovered decades later, contained only one entry about the letter. Some truths are better left in the dark. In 1901, during a Vatican-led effort to catalogue unexplained relics and phenomena, the letter was temporarily moved to Rome for examination. A Dominican priest tasked with the review described it as a cipher with no key, composed by a hand under compulsion. He returned it swiftly and recommended it remain unclassified, locked away without further analysis. Throughout the 20th century, scattered whispers of the letter surfaced in theological circles, but no coordinated effort was made to decipher it. Some said it was an embarrassing relic of superstition. Others suspected it was intentionally avoided to prevent doctrinal unrest. A few privately suggested it might not be a message for humans at all, but a mirror to test their faith. Notably, no pope has ever publicly acknowledged the letter, and no official theological stance has been issued. But among certain clergy, it developed a reputation, not as heresy, not a hoax, but as something else. Priests who encountered it described a lingering weight, one that seemed to resist even the thought of translation. Not fear exactly, not evil overtly, just an unnatural stillness that suggested the document wanted to remain unread. And for over 300 years, it did. Algorithms in the archives. The year was 2017, when a team of researchers from the Ludum Science Center in Catania, Italy, took a revolutionary approach to the mysterious letter. Unlike the generations of theologians, historians, and linguists who had studied Sister Maria Crocifissa's ink-stained parchment for centuries, these researchers were neither bound by faith nor constrained by tradition. They were cryptographers and computer scientists, experts in pattern recognition, artificial intelligence, and algorithmic decryption. Their first task was to obtain the highest possible fidelity image of the original letter. Using state-of-the-art scanning technology, they captured every stroke of ink, every smudge, every subtle nuance of the parchment's fibers. This wasn't merely a digital reproduction. It was a forensic-grade archive, a pixel-by-pixel map of the enigmatic message. But the real breakthrough lay in the computational power they brought to the problem. What set this group apart was their access to an advanced decryption algorithm that had evolved far beyond its original intent. The software was initially developed on the fringes of the dark web, coded by anonymous programmers trying to decode forgotten wartime transmissions encrypted in lost codes and ciphers. Over time, this algorithm was honed and expanded into a powerful AI system capable of analyzing thousands of ancient languages, cryptic scripts, and obscure shorthand systems simultaneously. This tool didn't rely on simple keyword matching or dictionary lookups. Instead, it used syllabic clustering to group sounds and symbols, statistical modeling to predict probable linguistic sequences, and neural networks trained on diverse datasets spanning Latin, ancient Greek, Arabic, runic scripts, and a multitude of religious ciphers. It was capable of spotting patterns where human eyes saw only chaos. The researchers fed the algorithm with datasets culled from religious texts, demonic sigils, liturgical shorthand, and archaic alphabets, an immense linguistic soup spanning millennia of human history. Into this complex web, they inserted the scanned image of Sister Maria's letter, allowing the algorithm to map, cross-reference, and generate overlapping language structures at a pace impossible for any human team. Days passed with little progress. The AI churned through millions of permutations, running countless analyses. Many feared it was all for naught, that the letter was simply gibberish, a byproduct of a disturbed mind or a chaotic outburst. But then, as if breaking through a fog, the algorithm began to produce fragments, words, phrases, syllables that bore an eerie resemblance to coherent language. Something starts to speak. The first recognizable fragments emerged almost like whispers from a forgotten past. The algorithm highlighted clusters of symbols that aligned with archaic linguistic roots, though these were not entire sentences, but rather partial statements, fragments that shimmered with meaning despite their incompleteness. Words began to surface. God, free mortals. A broken sentence, but laden with implication, a statement of divine incapacity or bondage. Another fragment read, dead burden, light fails, an ominous, almost poetic phrase that suggested decay and despair. Then came an even more unsettling mention. Styx is certain. The invocation of Styx, the river of the underworld in Greek mythology, a boundary between life and death, was profoundly disturbing in a document tied to Christian religious context. It was a deliberate insertion that blurred the lines between faith, myth, and dread. Each phrase, while incomplete, carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. The letter was not nonsense, nor the random scribblings of a tortured mind. It was a carefully constructed message, one cloaked in deliberate obfuscation, hidden beneath layers of arcane symbols designed to baffle and mislead. The researchers, driven by a growing unease, adjusted the algorithm's parameters to be more sensitive to contextual patterns rather than isolated fragments. Slowly, the scattered pieces began to coalesce into something resembling a coherent text, an eerie narrative emerging from the chaos. What the AI began to unveil next would shake the foundations of their understanding, hinting at a message that was not only cryptic, but chilling in its implications. The words were no longer just fragments. They hinted at a warning, a prophecy, or perhaps a declaration, one that suggested humanity was touching something it was never meant to comprehend. The warning buried in the symbols. Decoding efforts continued with a mix of urgency and dread. As more symbols were deciphered, the message shifted from defiance to dire prophecy. It spoke not only of rebellion, but of impending doom, of a world shackled by a system that works for no one, a divine order that had betrayed its own purpose. The letter portrayed humanity as lost within an elaborate illusion, abandoned by any true salvation and left to wander through darkness and silence. The language was poetic, yet chilling, filled with metaphors of decay and abandonment. It described a spiritual rot seeping into the fabric of existence, threatening to unravel the very essence of life itself. The symbols revealed ominous references to silence swallowing the light, shadows creeping where once was hope, and the gradual collapse of order into chaos. Among these fragments, one phrase pierced through the layers of enigma with stark clarity. This is not the order of salvation. We are in danger. This line appeared twice, echoed in different segments of the text, underscoring its urgency and weight. It was no vague metaphor or allegory. It was a direct, unambiguous warning, an alert of a threat, both immediate and existential. The researchers sat in silence, grappling with the implications. How could a nun from 1676, confined to her convent and bound by the religious doctrines of her time, compose such a message? Was she a philosophical heretic, consciously rejecting divine order in favor of some new, radical vision? Or was she a vessel, an unwitting conduit for something far older, something darker, and something very real? The notion that these words were encoded in a cipher so complex it could only be unraveled by 21st century artificial intelligence added another layer of mystery. Why encrypt such a message in symbols that no contemporary scholar could decipher? Was it a secret meant to be buried in time? A warning encoded for future generations when the means to understand it would finally exist? As the night deepened, the team stared at the glowing screen, a quiet unease settling over them. They realized this was no ordinary historical curiosity. This was a message from the past that might still have consequences for the present. And whatever danger awaited, it had been foretold centuries ago by a voice that was only now being truly heard. Psychological descent or possession? The 17th century was a time when the line between mental illness and the supernatural was blurred beyond recognition, especially within the confines of religious life. When Sister Maria Crocifissa della Concezione first began exhibiting erratic behavior, many in the convent and wider ecclesiastical community were at a loss. Some scholars and psychologists of our modern era have looked back on her case and proposed secular explanations rooted in mental health. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and other psychotic disorders are known to manifest symptoms including hallucinations and delusions. often involving religious figures or apocalyptic themes. Such conditions, especially untreated in an environment as isolating and regimented as a convent, could plausibly lead a gifted but tormented mind to create complex and nonsensical writings, what we might now interpret as a form of glossolalia or automatic writing. Yet the very nature of the letter Sister Maria produced challenges these assumptions. Unlike the fragmented ramblings or incoherent scrawls typically associated with psychosis, this letter bore the hallmarks of an intentional, structured cipher. Linguists and cryptographers who have studied the document emphasize its remarkable coherence across multiple ancient alphabets, languages, and symbolic systems. It's as if Sister Maria's hand had been guided by a force capable of weaving together an intricate tapestry of coded language, something that no mere hallucination or disordered mind could invent in such a disciplined, layered fashion. Moreover, the convent's own records paint a disturbing portrait of Sister Maria's descent. The sisters frequently noted her piercing screams during the dead of night, shrieks that spoke of invisible assaults by legions of dark entities. Her spiritual crisis deepened as she refused communion repeatedly, declaring that the silence of heaven had fallen, as though God himself had abandoned her. This spiritual desolation grew into an increasing detachment from her fellow nuns and reality itself, culminating in the mysterious letter that she insisted was authored by the devil. Remarkably, Sister Maria never sought to decode the text or offer a rational explanation, only the chilling assertion that it was a direct message from a malevolent source, a warning or a curse, perhaps, encoded beyond the reach of ordinary understanding. The possibility of possession was whispered quietly among the more superstitious sisters and clergy, though such claims were dangerous and easily dismissed as hysteria or heresy. Was Sister Maria a victim of severe mental illness, or had she been gripped by something far darker, a genuine spiritual affliction that defied the medical knowledge of her time and still eludes modern science? Vatican apathy or suppression? Fast forward to the present, when the same letter that terrified the convent in 1676 has finally been partially decrypted through the lens of cutting-edge AI technology. The revelations extracted from this cryptic document are nothing short of unsettling, and yet the Vatican has remained conspicuously silent. Despite the growing buzz in academic and digital circles about the letter's contents, the Holy See has not issued any formal statement, nor has it acknowledged the legitimacy or significance of the translation. This silence is not easily explained. The letter remains buried deep within the Vatican's private archives, an artifact both hidden and preserved with meticulous care. It has not been catalogued alongside other known historical texts or considered worthy of public disclosure, and no effort has been made to clarify its origins or implications. The Church's shadowy Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the very office charged with scrutinizing supernatural claims and combating heresy, appears to have either dismissed the letter or decided to keep it under strict wraps. The silence begs the question: are we witnessing an institution afraid to confront truths that could undermine centuries of doctrine? Or is this silence a measured act of protection, safeguarding the faithful from a message too dangerous to expose? Either way, the letter remains locked away, its chilling warning unheard, its full meaning yet to be reckoned with. The deeper implication hangs in the air, unanswered and unnerving, in the face of something inexplicable. What is the cost of silence, and what does it mean for all of us? The final translation. In the closing months of 2024, after years of painstaking effort and countless iterative cycles of analysis, The final decoding of Sister Maria's letter was allegedly completed. The room where the researchers gathered was reportedly charged with anticipation. What had for centuries been dismissed as gibberish, madness, or demonic nonsense was now purportedly fully unveiled. But what emerged was unlike anything anyone had expected. This was not a simple religious text, nor a desperate plea from a troubled soul. Instead, the letter allegedly revealed a profound, unsettling spiritual rejection. The carefully arranged symbols and ciphers did not merely obscure meaning. They appeared to construct a deliberate message that cut deeply into the very fabric of faith itself. Among the first deciphered lines were, "God thinks he can free mortals. The system works for no one. Perhaps now, Styx is certain." And most disturbingly, the Holy Trinity are dead weights. These phrases, fragmentary but intelligible, carried a cold, detached tone. There was no plea for salvation, no desperate repentance. The voice behind the letter seemed to reject not just religious dogma, but the very structure of divine authority. The Trinity, God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, were not invoked in reverence. They were dismissed outright, framed as spiritual shackles that bound the soul in illusion. To call the Trinity dead weights was more than blasphemy. It was a declaration, a deliberate challenge to the central pillar of Christian theology. The letter went on to question the divine order itself, portraying it as a broken system, one that traps humanity in suffering and silence. "Perhaps now, Styx is certain," it read, invoking the mythic river of the dead in a Christian context. It was a line that blurred myth and faith, suggesting not salvation beyond death, but a crossing into finality and erasure. Unlike the emotional turbulence often associated with mental illness or spiritual torment, these statements were delivered with an almost clinical detachment. This wasn't a scream of anguish. It was a diagnosis, a rejection not born of confusion, but of conviction. For the researchers, many of whom were secular linguists and historians, this revelation was unnerving. The text, while still incomplete, felt less like the ramblings of a 17th century nun and more like a manifesto. It was as if Sister Maria had composed a message not for her time, but for a distant future, encrypted in a way no one from her century could decode, awaiting minds equipped with tools that didn't yet exist. The letter now seemed engineered to transcend time, hidden beneath arcane symbols and conflicting scripts, not to confuse, but to delay understanding. And now, centuries later, the veil is lifting. Was Sister Maria a brilliant mind, driven to the edge in isolation, a victim of mental illness, expressing her crisis through coded language, or had she, as she claimed, been a vessel used by something else to deliver a message meant not for her sisters, but for us? Whatever the truth behind the hand that wrote it, the letter's tone remains chilling in its precision. This is not the order of salvation. We are in danger. That warning, clear, deliberate, and repeated, now lingers as the final legacy of a message buried for centuries. Whether it came from madness, vision, or something altogether darker, one thing is clear. Sister Maria's voice, once silenced and sealed away, is speaking again. And what it has to say might not be done with us yet. So what do you believe? Madness, possession, or something else entirely?